Ron Palillo as Arnold Horshack. In the mid-1970s, television audiences were completely captivated by Arnold Horshack, the awkward student with his hand perpetually raised and his unmistakable cry of, "Ooh, ooh, ooh." Drawing on the discipline of a classically trained stage actor, Ron Palillo shaped Horshack into an iconic character, the very heartbeat of laughter in the Sweathogs classroom. This role was not merely a commercial success. It became a bridge that connected the hearts of millions of American children to the small screen during that era. Yet few realized that behind those joyful laughs lived a soul already fractured from childhood. Tragedy struck in 1958 when Ron was just 9 years old and lost his father, the family's pillar, to devastating lung cancer. That early emptiness planted deep-rooted anxiety in his mind, leading him to use acting as a mask to hide his naturally shy and fragile nature. Cruelly enough, the role of Arnold Horshack later became an iron cage that confined his career. Throughout the 1980s, Ron found himself trapped in professional despair, typecast as the fool, while every attempt to transition into serious Shakespearean theater was coldly rejected by the public. The deepest anguish, however, lay in the suffocating restraints of his private life, burdens he carried for more than 4 decades. In an era ruled by prejudice, Ron was forced to keep his relationship with his life partner, Joseph Graham, hidden in the shadows for 41 years. Driven by fear of being erased from the entertainment industry. This lifelong denial of self steadily eroded his mental health, pushing him into heavy cigarette addiction as a means of release. The final blow came on January 26, 2012, when his closest friend, Robert Hegyes, died suddenly of a heart attack. Robert's passing struck like a fatal blade, shattering Ron's remaining will to endure and plunging him into profound despair. Just 7 months later, in the early morning of August 14, 2012, a massive heart attack claimed Ron's life at his home in Palm Beach Gardens. He was 63 years old. After a lifetime spent bringing laughter to others, he departed in chilling silence, leaving behind unfinished theatrical dreams that would never be realized. Ron Palillo's passing marked a quiet, sorrowful pause, closing the journey of a gifted yet deeply burdened artist. Though his body has returned to dust and the spotlight has long faded, the spirit of Arnold Horshack endures as a cherished memory, a testament to the resilience of a man who spent his entire life weaving laughter from the broken fragments of his own pain. Gabe Kaplan as Gabe Kotter. When audiences hear the name Gabe Kaplan, they instantly remember the warm-hearted teacher Gabe Kotter, the soul of James Buchanan High School. With his signature curly hair and Brooklyn-bred humor, Kaplan didn't merely play the role, he became it, breathing hope into students society had long dismissed as lost causes. Kotter's patience and compassion grew into a moral compass for viewers and a defining memory of countless American households in the late 1970s. Yet behind that radiant smile lay a cruel sentence born from the suffocating weight of fame. The tragedy began when Kaplan became locked in a brutal internal war with producer James Comack. Irreconcilable creative conflicts stripped him of control over his own brainchild, and during the final seasons of the series, 1978 to 1979, his screen time was reduced to a bare minimum. The result was a humiliating isolation, right at the very place where he had once shone brightest. That pain deepened as his marriage to Marcia collapsed beyond repair. In 1980, their divorce became final, leaving Kaplan to raise his child alone while facing Hollywood's cold indifference. For years afterward, he was trapped by his own iconic role, overlooked by directors, forgotten by the industry, transforming a gifted comedian into someone deemed unnecessary in the heart of the entertainment capital. But even that was not the deepest cruelty. For the darkest turning point arrived when Kaplan plunged into high-stakes gambling to numb the emptiness within. He became a professional poker player, but the price was his inner peace. There were sleepless nights in Las Vegas casinos when millions of dollars, the earnings of decades on film sets, vanished in the blink of an eye. As his career faded and the spotlight dimmed, Kaplan was forced to endure the sudden deaths of his closest friends, Robert Hegyes and Ron Palillo, both in 2012, leaving him alone with nothing but fractured memories. In his later years, the wise and compassionate Mr. Kotter no longer appeared before the public. Only an aging Gabe Kaplan, quietly seated at a poker table, possessing a fortune reportedly worth up to $50 million, yet carrying a soul torn apart by profound loneliness. In a bitter twist of fate, the man who once taught his students how to rise after failure on screen became the one who fell most painfully into the merciless vortex of real-life gambling. Now, at the age of 80, Gabe Kaplan lives a quiet life, far removed from the glare of public scrutiny. Though life's upheavals and reckless wagers have left deep scars in the hearts of devoted fans, the image of Mr. Kotter, with his gentle eyes, remains immortal. We honor the legacy Kaplan left behind, a beautiful memory of compassion and humanity, even if that laughter he gave the world came at the cost of a lifetime spent weathering relentless storms. Gabe Kaplan's sudden transformation from the model, compassionate teacher on screen to a professional poker player has sparked endless debate. Many believe poker was simply an intellectual passion, a way for him to reclaim freedom after years of being constrained by Hollywood. Yet others can't help but feel heartbroken, arguing that immersing himself in life-or-death card games was merely an escape from loneliness and the crushing disappointment that followed the fading of fame. What do you think? Was it the courage of a man unafraid to change his path, or a slow descent into despair by a fallen star? Comment 1 if you support his choice. Comment 0 if you mourn the loss of the Mr. Kotter we once knew. Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs as Freddy Boom Boom Washington. Amid the chaotic energy of the Sweathogs classroom in 1975, Freddy Boom Boom Washington stood out like a magnet, commanding attention with his effortless swagger and captivating self-confidence. Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs infused the character with a rare sense of elegance, turning Freddy into a symbol of youthful freedom for urban America. More than a comedic role, Freddy became a powerful source of inspiration, an affirmation of self-worth and visibility for Black audiences on national television. Yet behind that radiant spotlight lay a brutal fight for survival that Lawrence had been waging since childhood. Born into a struggling working-class family in New York, one of 9 siblings, he tasted hardship early, taking on every job imaginable from delivery work to warehouse labor, just to help his parents make ends meet. The true tragedy began when his career reached its peak, only for Lawrence to collide head-on with the unforgiving wall of racial prejudice that defined Hollywood in the 1970s. He was repeatedly ignored by studios or forced into shallow, stereotypical roles solely because of the color of his skin. Financial pressure tightened relentlessly as he shouldered the responsibility of raising 5 children alone in an industry riddled with instability. Even his attempts to assert his musical identity through the album Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs, 1978, were met with cold indifference from critics, plunging him into a personal crisis as his multifaceted artistic identity was harshly dismissed. The most painful turning point in his journey came through the cruel erasure of time and the agony of those left behind. In the decades following the show's conclusion, Lawrence endured prolonged unemployment, forced to accept minor guest appearances simply to keep up with mounting bills. Cruelty reached its peak in 2012, when he was forced to witness the sudden deaths of his closest confidants, Robert Hegyes and Ron Palillo, the only people who truly understood the hidden struggles of the Sweathogs. As death tore apart the brightest fragments of his past, Lawrence was left in the profound loneliness of an aging warrior standing alone. Now in his 70s, instead of enjoying a peaceful retirement, he continues to work tirelessly in a world that has grown indifferent, where the name Boom Boom Washington has faded into a distant echo. It is heartbreaking to see a legend who once warmed the hearts of generations still battling the harsh realities of survival within a silent mansion, haunted nightly by the memories of loved ones long gone. The life of Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs is an epic testament to endurance amid the storms of prejudice and solitude. Though his path has been soaked in the sweat and tears of a solitary traveler, the artistic value he left behind continues to shine like a beacon. We honor his resilience, a soul that never surrendered to fate, an artist who devoted his entire life to proving that true dignity lies in unwavering dedication, sustained until the very final moment. John Travolta as Vinnie Barbarino. In 1975, America was suddenly swept into a frenzy by the rebellious charm and irresistible smirk of Vinnie Barbarino. At just 21 years old, John Travolta breathed electric life into the leader of the Sweathogs, transforming a streetwise kid into a full-fledged pop culture icon. His effortless swagger and dazzling dance moves didn't merely redefine television. They ignited a new era, planting in the hearts of generations a longing for youth that was bold, radiant, and unapologetically free. Yet, just as fame reached its most blinding peak, fate struck his life with merciless force. In 1977, while the world celebrated John's rising stardom, behind the scenes he was enduring quiet agony, caring for Diana Hyland, his first great love. Breast cancer cruelly took her life in his trembling arms at the age of 44. Before that wound could even begin to heal, tragedy returned the very next year. In 1978, the same devastating illness claimed Helen Travolta, his beloved mother and emotional anchor. This double loss plunged the young actor into a deep depression, stripping him of direction and purpose. Throughout the 1980s, John's career collapsed into painful stagnation. Films like Two of a Kind, 1983, and Perfect, 1985, failed miserably at the box office, and Hollywood critics dismissed him as a relic, an abandoned monument of a bygone era. The darkest and most horrifying turning point of his life came on January 2, 2009. During a family vacation in the Bahamas, his eldest son, Jet Travolta, just 16 years old, passed away after a sudden seizure. The loss shattered John completely, pushing him to the brink of abandoning everything he had left. Yet cruelty did not end there. In the chaos of mourning, he became the target of a vile $25 million extortion attempt by paramedic Tarino Lightborn, forcing him into court to relive the final moments of his son's life before a relentless public gaze. After years of struggling to heal alongside his devoted wife Kelly Preston, tragedy struck once more. In July 2020, Kelly passed away at the age of 57 after a 2-year private battle with cancer. Having watched the same merciless disease take away the people he loved most, John was left a fractured soul, raising his children alone inside a vast mansion filled with silence and unfillable voids. Now, at 71, John Travolta has chosen to step away from the spotlight, devoting himself entirely to life as a single father. Though his life reads like a long elegy of loss and tears, his ability to rise after every devastating fall has become a quiet legend of resilience. Vinnie Barbarino may have aged, but John Travolta's unbreakable spirit remains, an enduring, tragic, and heroic chapter in the history of world cinema. George Carlin as Wally Wexler. George Carlin's appearance as Wally Wexler in 1977 left a distinctly different mark, injecting the Kotter classroom with the irreverence and razor-sharp intellect of a true stand-up comedy master. With his unparalleled command of language, Carlin transformed a brief guest role into something electric, awakening audiences to the thrill of a rebellious mind unafraid to challenge the rigid norms of American television at the time. Yet behind that composed presence and provocative rhetoric lived a soul writhing in a storm of self-destruction. The tragedy took root in a childhood devoid of paternal warmth. His alcoholic father abandoned the family when George was only a few months old, leaving him with a lifelong distrust of intimacy and belonging. As fame intensified, he fell into the trap of dependency, abusing drugs and alcohol for decades to numb an inner emptiness that success could not fill. By the 1970s and 1980s, poor financial management combined with an indulgent lifestyle plunged him into massive tax debt, forcing the gifted artist into relentless overwork merely to pay for his own excesses. His body soon rebelled, suffering 2 heart attacks in 1978 and 1982, grim warnings of the turbulent ending ahead. The most harrowing and tear-soaked chapter of George's life came in 1997, when Brenda Hosbrook, his devoted wife of more than 30 years, passed away from liver cancer. Her death struck like a blade, tearing away his final emotional anchor and plunging him into deep depression, bringing him dangerously close to relapse into old addictions. Tragically, although he sought recovery at a rehabilitation center in 2004, his heart had already been irreparably weakened by a 3rd heart attack in 1991. On June 22, 2008, at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, the uncrowned king of stand-up comedy passed away from heart failure at the age of 71. He died just 1 week before he was to receive the prestigious Mark Twain Prize. A man who spent his life using anger to awaken the world ultimately closed his eyes in the numbing silence of a hospital room, just as the greatest honor of his career came knocking. George Carlin's passing marked the end of a journey shaped by a towering intellect that stood relentlessly on the side of truth, no matter the cost. Though his body has returned to dust, his cutting insights and defiant spirit remain an enduring flame, warming the souls of those brave enough to live differently. We bow before a monument of thought and courage, an artist who forged the bitterness of his own life into a weapon of piercing art, leaving behind an immortal legacy in the hearts of audiences around the world. Robert Hegyes as Juan Epstein. In 1975, the arrival of Juan Epstein, with his wild curls and those infamous forged excuse notes from his mother, sent a comedic shockwave across American television. Through sharp instincts and explosive energy, Robert Hegyes transformed the mischievous student into an indispensable member of the Sweathogs. The role was not only the breakthrough that carried his name into households nationwide, but also a symbol of youthful rebellion, reckless, defiant, yet irresistibly endearing. Yet beneath that swaggering exterior lived a soul deeply scarred by the ruthless machinery of the entertainment industry. When the series ended in 1979, Robert was jolted into a harsh reality. Fame had become a trap. Hollywood permanently nailed him to the image of Epstein, shutting the door on every attempt to pursue more layered roles on Broadway or in film. His private life offered little refuge. 3 failed marriages left lasting wounds. Separations from Mary Coons and Kyle Drummer not only drained him financially, but pushed him further into profound isolation. By the 1990s, with no meaningful opportunities left, the once promising actor was forced to swallow his pride and return to his hometown, taking a teaching position at Venice High School simply to survive day by day. The most brutal chapter arrived quietly, as years of emotional anguish took a silent toll on his heart. The suffering reached its tragic climax on January 26, 2012, when a massive heart attack struck him down at his home in Metuchen, New Jersey, the very place where his youthful artistic dreams had once taken shape. The cruel symmetry felt like a final blade, extinguishing the last hope of a triumphant return. Though he was rushed to JFK Medical Center, Robert's heart, exhausted by decades of disappointment and public neglect, could no longer endure. He passed away at the age of 60, leaving behind unfinished memoir projects still resting on his desk. In a bitter irony, a man who had devoted his youth to bringing laughter into millions of homes ended his life in haunting silence, felled by a heart overwhelmed by sorrow. Robert Hegyes' passing left a vast emptiness in the memories of those who cherished Welcome Back, Kotter. Though the candle of his life was extinguished while so many dreams remained unfulfilled, the playful spirit of Juan Epstein will forever remain a bright, joyful note in the minds of audiences. His devotion stands as a poignant reminder of an artist who gave everything he had, proof that even when the ending is unbearably bitter, true artistic legacy endures beyond time. Pat Morita as Taro Takahashi. In 1976, the arrival of Taro Takahashi brought a fresh, humorous breeze into the Sweathogs classroom. With understated charm and the deep empathy of an Asian American artist, Pat Morita shaped a character who was both mischievous and sincere. Though only a supporting presence, his distinctly personal performance left an indelible mark, quietly paving the way for his later rise as an international film legend. Few truly understood that behind Morita's gentle smile lay a past forged in years of tears and suffering. At just 2 years old, he was diagnosed with spinal tuberculosis, forcing him to endure 9 long years encased in full-body casts inside public hospitals across California. One might have thought that successful surgery at age 11 would finally grant him freedom, yet cruel fate intervened again when his family was sent to the Gila River internment camp during World War II. Those childhood years of confinement, both physical and emotional, planted deep seeds of insecurity and lifelong loneliness. To numb the emptiness within, Pat turned to alcohol as a temporary anesthetic, beginning a destructive addiction that would haunt him for decades. Even at the height of his success, marked by an Academy Award nomination in 1984, he was quietly enduring the collapse of 3 marriages, to Kathleen Yamachi and Yuki Kitahara, leaving the idea of a stable home painfully out of reach. The most heartbreaking and unforgiving turn came in his final years, when the demon of alcoholism began to exact its full price. Once a respected star, Pat gradually slipped into Hollywood's shadows, forced to accept minor, forgettable roles simply to sustain his addiction and cover mounting medical bills. Kidney failure and heart disease ravaged his body without mercy, reducing the once wise and composed Mr. Miyagi into a frail, solitary old man. The tragedy reached its quiet peak on November 24, 2005, when Pat Morita passed away at the age of 73 in a Las Vegas apartment, his death marked by profound silence and aching solitude. He succumbed to organ failure after years of self-destruction through alcohol, without a loved one by his side in his final moments. It is deeply painful to realize that the man who taught generations the philosophy of balance in life ultimately fell victim to the imbalance within his own body and soul. Pat Morita's passing was a sorrowful pause in the story of a man who spent his life fighting adversity in service of art. Though his physical form has faded after years of storms, the light of his compassion and the lessons he imparted about humanity continue to shine brightly. We honor a great talent who used the broken fragments of his own life to weave hope, strength, and belief for countless generations of audiences around the world. Debralee Scott as Rosalie Hotsy Totsy. The presence of Rosalie Hotsy Totsy brought an irresistible spark to the early episodes of Welcome Back, Kotter. With her sharp beauty and keen acting instincts, Debralee Scott shaped the image of a bold, expressive schoolgirl layered with subtle depth. Her radiance didn't merely brighten the screen. It etched itself into viewers' memories as a symbol of youthful allure and vibrant energy amid the playful chaos of the Sweathogs. Yet behind that bright smile lay a life repeatedly battered by the unforgiving nature of the entertainment industry. Tragedy took shape in the late 1980s, when Debralee found herself gradually pushed aside by Hollywood as youth faded and she became trapped in shallow, limiting roles. This ruthless rejection forced her to step away from the spotlight and retreat into the quiet world of talent management. The emotional scars deepened as her romantic relationships with stars such as Desi Arnaz Jr. and Ringo Starr ended in betrayal and heartbreak. In 1988, her brief marriage to Jonathan Brooks also collapsed, leaving her adrift and questioning her own worth. To dull the pain, she turned to alcohol as an escape from a dead-end reality, slowly destroying her already fragile liver and immune system. The most devastating and heart-wrenching turn in her life came on September 11, 2001. Her fiancé, NYPD officer John Dennis Levi, was killed while performing rescue efforts at the Twin Towers. Watching the man she loved most vanish into the ashes of national tragedy shattered Debralee completely, driving her into an endless haze of drinking to numb the horror. Fate struck again in early 2005, when she moved to Florida to care for her dying sister, even as her own body was failing rapidly. On April 2, 2005, Debralee briefly emerged from a deep coma on her 52nd birthday, a fleeting moment of hope. But just 3 days later, on April 5th, she passed away quietly in a silent room on Amelia Island. She died from complications of severe liver failure, bringing to an end a life marked by relentless loss and profound loneliness down to the very core. Debralee Scott's passing was a sorrowful pause for a sensitive soul crushed by the upheavals of her time. Though her physical form has dissolved after countless storms, the sparkling eyes of Rosalie Hotsy Totsy remain a beautiful fragment of 1970s television history. We honor a life like that of a silkworm, struggling to spin its final threads amid bitterness, leaving behind a deep ache for a heart that longed for love but was ultimately denied by fate. Marcia Strassman as Julie Kotter. In the memories of those who cherished television in 1975, Julie Kotter appears as a quiet harbor, a gentle woman who kept the home of teacher Gabe whole and warm. Marcia Strassman portrayed the character with grace and softness, shaping Julie into the very image of the ideal wife in the public imagination. Her sweetness and natural performance not only warmed the Kotter kitchen, but also won the hearts of millions of viewers at the time. Ironically, behind that picture of domestic harmony lay a life fractured by the darker side of fame. Entering the entertainment industry at just 15, Marcia was quickly swept into a ruthless system where beauty and talent were reduced to cold calculations. Her private tragedy became undeniable when her marriage to director Robert Collector ended in divorce in 1989 after 5 years together. The collapse left Marcia raising her daughter Elizabeth alone in a male-dominated Hollywood. She was forced to endure relentless financial pressure, while her career grew increasingly unstable as studios began to turn away. That a former box office force, who once captivated audiences in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, had to accept small roles simply to pay mounting medical bills, became a deep wound to her pride, one that never truly healed. The darkest and most painful chapter of her lifelong devotion to her craft began in 2007 when she was handed a death sentence called advanced stage breast cancer. Instead of enjoying a peaceful later life, Marcia was thrust into an uneven battle for survival, enduring rounds of chemotherapy that relentlessly eroded her body. Fate grew even crueler when the cancer metastasized to her bones, unleashing searing pain no medication could ease. Over 7 years of confronting death, she chose to write her memoir, Life with a Side Order of Cancer, 2008, as a final plea for understanding and compassion. On October 24, 2014, in her home in Sherman Oaks, Marcia quietly passed away at the age of 66. A woman who had spent her life igniting happiness on screen ultimately saw her own journey end amid devastating illness and profound solitude. Marcia Strassman's passing closed a life chapter filled with turbulence, but also with dignity, like a rose that bloomed despite its thorns. Though the candle of her life was extinguished after relentless inner storms, her legacy of courage and the gentle image of Julie Kotter remain an enduring, bittersweet note in television history. We bow in respect to a devoted soul, an artist who transformed unbearable suffering into strength, inspiring the world until her very final breath. The classroom of Mr. Kotter now survives only in faded frames of memory. Though the spotlight has dimmed and many of its stars have drifted into the heavens after enduring countless storms, their laughter still pulses as the heartbeat of a radiant youth. Among these tragic stories, whose life moved you the most? Share your feelings in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe as we continue honoring the legends of a bygone era.